오늘의 주제는 과연 게임 아이템 트레이딩 과연 우리의 미래인가라는 주제로 약간 그것이 알고 싶다 톤이긴 한데요.로 오늘 패널 디스커션을 할 예정이고요. 재미있는 질문들이 많이 있더라고요. 이번에 MC는 영알못인 제가 MC를 하시는 게 아닌 여기 말콤이 직접 MC를 하실 예정이고요. 들으시면서 끝나고 난 후에 또 한번 퀘스천 할 수 있으니까요. 하시고 나서 궁금한 거 있으면 여쭤보시면 될 것 같습니다. 네, 그러면 please.
Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, you guys know who I am, so I'm going to shut up and let some experts talk. So, Jason, why don't you go first and tell the audience a little bit about your background in video gaming?
Okay, my name is Jason Jun. I'm an evangelist for NHN Entertainment. We're actually working on our own gaming blockchain project. My personal background is my whole career is in gaming. As a producer, game designer, entrepreneur, I've made mobile games, PC games, Flash games. So yeah, anything else? Okay.
Go ahead.
All right. Yeah. Hi everyone, my name is Andrew Kim. My background is more the VR. I happened to join Oculus early enough to get some VR experience and some good exit. And been into China, leading some VR companies in China for the last 2 years. I recently joined Decentraland because VR needed some help. There are a lot of hungry guys in the VR field, and I thought that Decentraland is the platform that where its next content could actually survive. So yeah, that's my background. Nice to meet you all.
Yeah, well, I thank both of you for joining us tonight. Between the two of you, you probably bring like several decades of game experience. I know it doesn't look like it, but I could tell you guys have done a lot, and of course know your backgrounds. So I think the first question that I want to hear your opinion on is, a lot of users who spend a lot of time playing games feel like they own those items because they either spent money in the game or they put all this time and energy, they earned it. So, as guys sitting on the other side who produce the games, what do you think about that point of view?
So I don't play a whole lot of different MMO, but I spend too much time on COC and Crash Royale, way too much, and spend quite a bit of money on it. But do I feel like I own it? Not necessarily. Did I invest it in it? Yes, I did invest a lot of money on it. I think it started as though it is sort of features or function where I can achieve the next level rather than owning that item myself or the character myself. I think it's probably because it didn't have that originality and the uniqueness, which I believe in the non-fungible token. It is something that I only have and no one else has, and it's worthwhile keeping it. That's my experience.
I think generally, as a hardcore gamer myself, I do feel that gamers do feel like they own the item, mainly because those are the rules presented to them in the game design, and that's what gamers are used to, right? So if I play Overwatch and I own a skin for a certain character, it's mine to use, it's mine to manipulate and customize my own, my own characters. I think gamers generally do trust the game publishers and designers. I don't think, Blizzard or Valve, they're gonna take away my items just on a whim. I think there's generally some trust between gamers and the big game companies. I do feel that generally that ownership does exist in today's world, but now that blockchain technology has come and has enabled things like NFTs and liquidity in marketplaces, I feel that ownership has evolved into something that feels more real and tangible. But to answer your question, I do think players do generally feel like they do own their items. Yeah.
So if they own the items, if they feel like they own the items, let's take one step further. Should they have the ability to do whatever they want with them, like trade them or sell them or modify them? Where do you think is like the boundary? Where does the limit end if you accept that they feel like they own it, let's just assume that premise. How far would you, as a game designer, feel it's proper to allow them to go?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to say because it's a very it really depends on the type of game, right? I mean, we're talking about games. We're talking about like CS:GO and like World of Warcraft, but you know the spectrum of games ranges much broader than that. Actually, the most prominent games are like casual games, like match 3 games, right? I don't think that question really applies to those type of games specifically. I think we're talking about more traditional hardcore games. But I think it's up to the game designer. I think the game designer or the game developer has really all the power to dictate the universe or the world and the rules of the game. Now, something like CryptoKitties, I feel like that game was designed around kind of the interesting aspects of blockchain, and it was designed to utilize tradability, liquidity. I think that's what made the CryptoKitties interesting. But for traditional games like, let's say, Overwatch or World of Warcraft or PUBG, it's not really up to the players to decide. I think it's up to the game developers, right? And I think they want to do what's best to engage the gamers as much as possible. But on a theoretical standpoint, I think it's great to give more power to players as long as the game balance is intact and keeps the engagement level high.
Like I said, I don't think I feel like I own it. So because I spend, let's say, $1,000 on a set of characters, and I cannot sell it. It doesn't have the same value that I put it in. So I mean, I put my time on it and my money on it to grow it, but I cannot sell it back and get back that time and money that I put on. So eventually, I don't feel like I own it. Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about so we'll keep the conversation going about this idea of secondary markets. I bring this up because I've heard this point of view that if there's a secondary market, so let's say you've put $1,000 into acquiring items, and you're able to go sell it, and let's say you can get $500 or $700 back. Some people believe that money will probably go back into the game ecosystem, maybe into the game you played, but probably back into games because you're a hardcore gamer. And that money came from somewhere else, right? It was someone else out there gave you that money, and now you have that money to go spend. So do you think that means that secondary markets actually enhance the revenue or enhance the publisher's business?
I mean, myself, I'm not so much a fan of a secondary market because I generally don't have a level of trust. So, and I don't know the source of their income and then where they belong. So that's generally, that's how I feel. I don't think it goes back to the whole ecosystem because there's some gap in there somewhere.
I think it really depends on the game. And this is not from a gamer's perspective, this is from a game developer / publisher's perspective. I feel like if they design the game around trading and enable trading within the game itself, I think they could capture all of the value. But I think some game developers actually don't focus on that. Maybe the CS:GO developers, they focus on just the gameplay, right? And they allow other parties to do secondary markets and create this other trading platform because they feel like it brings engagement and brings more engagement and more fun back into the game. But to answer that question, I think there isn't a yes or no answer to that because we've seen instances where the question came about like the Diablo 3 real money auction house. That was terrible for the game. That actually just ruined the gameplay. And it wasn't even about leveling up your character. It was about just manipulating the auction house and just, if you spend real money there, you just broke the game because there's no purpose into playing the game. So that was like a bad use of, the game developer probably trying to capture all that value. But I think it could actually be beneficial because I think trading by nature, P2P is fun and it's social, just from that aspect. So I think it could bring more engagement and fun back into the game, which makes the general gaming ecosystem better, and I think players just play the game longer. And
Yeah, we've observed that people will stay engaged with a game when trading happens because it stays relevant and it becomes like a meta game. Like you said, it's very social. So let's talk a little bit about, games have been creating virtual currencies for 20 years, right? We've been used to spending money and getting a virtual currency and spending it. So in a way, it seems like we've prepared gamers for cryptocurrency, mentally, right? It's a mental model they're used to. But what do you think is missing for like these for tokens to work inside games, or is it not necessary?
I think gamers generally know the aspect of digital currency, right? Because all games have digital currencies. They understand there's this fake money that exists that's used to transact, to buy game items, or to participate in the game design. So I do think gamers get it. It's just a currency, right? I think for gamers to adopt the cryptocurrency specifically into their games, I think it has more to do with reducing friction and easing the onboarding experience of cryptocurrency. Because I think blockchain technology itself is not something that you would want to educate mainstream people. I don't think they really care about the technology aspect. Like most gamers don't care about what's the back end of whatever game they're playing, right? They just care about the user experience. So as long as the onboarding experience and getting people to adopt cryptocurrency, I think they know how to use it, but getting them to adopt it and get their hands on it and being able to transact with it, I think that's the challenge.
I completely agree. Yeah, onboarding experience sucks at this time. But I think it's as Malcolm mentioned, the game is the place where the cryptocurrency will excel, and I think it's just a matter of time that we see some killer content, and everybody will be drawn to it. Although onboarding experience will still be a challenge, but I think if there's a killer games on the market, I think it would ease the people's mind.
So let's talk about the Korean market in particular. I mean, what things or consumer interests or trends do you see occurring here that are different vis-a-vis virtual currencies, cryptocurrency, and gaming?
So I got into a crypto field probably 6 months ago, so not in that aspect that I can't really share too much. But what we see is Korean people as a culture. Yeah, I think right now it's just a boiling. When we know this is something that actually we can make money off of it, and then people enjoy it, I think there will be a surge of developers, and I can already see it that there are people that are very interested in developing crypto games and getting this bandwagon.
Can you repeat the question one more time? Sorry.
Yeah, it was just hello. Oh well, I'll have to project. So I guess I was asking in the local market in Korea, what things do you see are different with regards to using virtual currency and ultimately cryptocurrency?
Okay. So I'm Korean American. I was born in America, so I'm not a real Korean, but I live here. But here are my observations. I think Koreans are very homogenous people. It's a very small country. It's a very dense country. I think trends, if they pick up quickly, right? You go outside Korea. I mean, I've noticed people are it's not as eclectic and diverse as, let's say, America, right? People have similar styles. They all kind of have similar hairstyles and wear similar types of clothing. And I think because of that, I think things spread really quickly. So a good case in point is, I think, cryptocurrency itself. I think Korea is a very interesting use case because they trade, I think at one point I read they traded like 30% of the volume of the entire cryptocurrency market, which is insane because Korea is such a small country, relatively speaking. And the other thing that's interesting about Korea is, Koreans are known for having a robust gaming industry and having a lot of gamers, right? So I bet all the Koreans here have played a game or two, currently. I don't know any Koreans that play 0 games, right? So that altogether makes kind of, Korea a little bit special in terms of cryptocurrency and gaming because they're on the forefront of both fields.
Yeah, I mean, given that Korea is really on the cutting edge of both, I guess my hypothesis would be that we will see the intersection of those two happen here first, right? That we'll see some application between virtual currency, video games, and blockchain happening in this market. So let's talk a little bit about, you have big game companies and you have the little indies who are producing things. Talk about, what is what are the concerns that a big game company has in terms of thinking about cryptocurrency? Like, what are their reservations?
Yeah, so I like I said, I'm from NHN Entertainment. We're a publicly listed company in Korea, and we're quite old and we're quite big. And as a public-facing company, we just have to be very careful with things like cryptocurrency because, the regulation's always changing. There's a lot of things that are in the gray area at the moment in Korea and other geographies. So as a public-facing company, I think we're more on the careful side and kind of seeing what's going on and being very cautious for obvious reasons. Whereas a startup, I think, can take much more risk and move a lot faster and take, try it, and if it doesn't work out, they'll, switch gears, change direction, be more agile. To me, that's I think the biggest differences, yeah.
I mean, completely agree, and therefore this crypto game is the opportunity for indie developers and all of us. If you are interested in making a content or games, it's a blue ocean. We need to get on it, and it's gonna pay some dividends in the future very soon.
So for the indie game developer who is sort of looking at this market, what do you think they need? Like, what advice would you give an indie developer? Let's say somebody in here wanted to build a game and maybe participate in this new NFT gold rush. What advice would you give them coming from the gaming industry?
I would say stay away from it. If you chase after what's been already popular, you will never actually be the number one. I think there's great excitement, crypto kitties and crypto bots and crypto egg and whatever it is. I mean, it's already too much. So I think the Korean people are very creative. So I think we got to come up with our own wave of a crypto game. I don't know what form that would be. Certainly Decentraland provides a new opportunity where non-fungible token is not only a collectible, but it defines the space and that you own, and then you can actually create a non-fungible token that it's actually functional. So that's certainly an option. That's why I joined. But I will stay away from what people have already done, and there are already a lot of players in that field. But the crypto game, in any form or shape, there's actually a non-fungible token elements to it, and then unique IP is required. So making an exciting game, as always we've done, and then I think it will apply same on the crypto field as well.
So I'm actually a big believer in indie developers. I used to be an indie developer myself. I think a lot of great ideas come from indie development. In terms of like crypto-related games or games revolving or based on non-fungible tokens, I think that's always going to be a super niche in the gaming market as a whole. But I do think it's very interesting, and I think developers that are interested in building something around NFTs, I think there's a lot more. There's a huge potential. I think if you're just going to look at crypto alpaca and crypto this and that, I think you're not going to get anywhere because, like you said, I don't think it's going to last too long. That's just my personal opinion. But if you look at any new platform, right? So when I was doing gaming, like on Facebook, when Facebook games first came out, when they launched their platform, do you remember the apps that were on Facebook? It was pretty crappy, right? When mobile games first came out, when your iPhone first came out and the App Store launched, remember what apps were on your App Store? Like fart apps and lighter apps, and like you press a button and something happens and everyone's like, whoa, and they made a lot of money, right? I think we're there right now, right? So I'm not trying to put down the projects right now. I think it's just a natural evolution, right? New platform really kind of iffy stuff in the beginning, and then soon after it starts evolving. Like mobile gaming has evolved tremendously. You have like PC, like games that look like PC games on your mobile phone, and it's only been around for less than a decade, right? So imagine, you know, it's gonna progress a lot further. So when we look at NFTs now, I think, like when we look at CryptoKitties and all these, I think we're gonna look at them and like they were pioneers. But we look at them, we're gonna laugh at them, and we're like, wow, this was so ghetto. Like we, you know,
Right. No,
like 2 years from
I
now,
hear
it's
you,
gonna be
yeah.
so engaging. We're gonna have like 3D multiplayer games using NFTs, and it's gonna be like amazing. But you know, for any developers, look 2 years ahead, look 3 years ahead. Don't look at what's built now. If you look what's built now, it's not gonna work out.
So speaking of like what's coming, you know, AR and VR was the most talked about category in gaming, you know, a year or two ago. Give us an update, like what's happening in AR and VR with regards to games.
You want the honest version or the AR VR expert version?
Wow.
So-
give us the public key first, then we'll get the private
It's
key.
still very exciting field to be in. I know. I think a lot of guys who are in the VR now, especially in Korea, mostly focus on developing offline experience, meaning you go to like arcade and theme park, that sort of content, because that's where you can actually make money right now. And you know, you could break even, or you could sell the contents to overseas, so on. So it is still a viable market. And a lot of guys actually now positioning, because it requires the similar skill sets, positioning on the more of the AR side as well. In overall, what the enthusiasm that we seen about 2 years ago on the VR, from the content developer perspective, we don't have scalable or sustainable or commercially viable platform. Even if you top in Steam or Oculus stores, the kind of money you're making is not under your expectation. So Decentraland, you know, we're a new platform. It's you own your own platform and there's no transaction. You can create the contents of your desires and all the things that Malcolm mentioned about sharing and then selling your non-fungible token is available in that field as well. So yeah, sadly speaking, I mean, this is where we are with the VR and AR. It could have been more exciting. I'm true believers that in 5 years or in the future, this is a trend certainly will come. But there's a rough road ahead for us.
Okay, I'm not an AR VR expert. I can only just speak from a consumer standpoint. So specifically for VR, I think it's always gonna has its niche use case, but in the end, it's expensive, it's bulky, there's a lot of friction, and then the experience you get from VR today, with all that friction, I don't think it's worth the payoff. So that's why I'm not that bullish on VR gaming in the near term. But once these devices get better, high performing, they get lighter and much cheaper, and we have more development on it, I think it would be more interesting. I'm more actually bullish on VR offline experiences versus online experiences.
When you say offline experiences, you
Offline, like you know, laser tag with VR, you know, like the Void in the US. I think those are really cool experiences. I had a great time. But like when I'm playing with my PlayStation VR, like I play for like 30 minutes and then I don't touch it for like 3 months. Personally.
For anyone who hasn't experienced, does anyone here know what an offline VR experience is?
Oh.
Got a few people. So why don't you just explain that?
Okay. It's an arcade store. You go in and then actually set an environment where you can actually feel like you're in it, and you can play multi-person play, shooting games. So it's not on your living room condition, but it's much bigger space, or it could be a room scale, but it creates the bigger, like a room experience. And often, a lot of times on offlines, there's also a simulator, whether it's like, you know, simulating the motion of the car or some flying objects. So it actually magnifies that immersive experience with the hardware simulator.
Yeah, so I mean, I've done an experience, you know, sitting on a chair, and you know, as like in the VR experience, I'm banking to the right, it literally feels like I'm flying. Like it feels the energy, you know, like when you're in a roller coaster and you're banking, like you have that experience like in your body, or if you're falling, you know, it drops, or, you know, it vibrates, or, you know, like it's very immersive. Yeah. But those kinds of things you can't do at a consumer level at home. You have to go to you know, place set up for that. All right, well, let's take some questions from folks. You know, we have like two amazing game experts here. Does anyone have some questions? Yeah.
So I was talking with my friend a little bit, and he raised a good point. So if you think of it, the blockchain is storing sort of the key to some digital asset, not the asset itself. But if you're storing like a game skin and store on CSGO servers, if CSGO deletes it, then you're kind of just screwed, aren't you? So do you see any way to get around that in the future for games?
Yeah, so you know, when a publisher decides to delete your item, you know, the publisher basically has to live with the wrath of the users. And you were talking about like generally the players trust the game companies not to do that without a good reason. And so that's kind of one thing you're sort of stuck with. Like, you know, if they delete your account or delete your item, like, you know, you're stuck with it. The only other thing is that NFTs, as we've been talking about, they have limited utility, but you have 100% control. So, you know, the thing that has utility, but there's always this risk, right? It's sort of like the money in your bank account, right? Like, you're pretty sure that money's going to be there tomorrow, but the bank could decide to take it, and you'd have to go fight and figure out how to get it back. So that's always a risk, but it happens so rarely that it's become a tolerable risk.
All right, another question for the panels here. All right then.
I think we stunned everyone with all this information about games. Well, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to participate. I was really illuminating. I love observing how you know, the folks actually making games, like, see the industry evolving. Decentraland is one of my favorite projects. Actually, one of the other things I did want to mention, since I have you here, we have a minute, was really about game funding. I think Decentraland had one of the most unique funding models, you know, selling land in a virtual world that hadn't yet been built. Can you talk a little bit about that process? Just like, you know, what your experience was with it and how you maybe see funding for games evolving?
So what's interesting, I mean, I wasn't at the very beginning of part of it, but what's interesting is as you know, we raise mana, which is our coin, and all of it is actually consumed back by on the land itself. So and it is for the developers and owners, and we will build the, you know, crypto economics on top of it. Personally, it was some crazy notion that actually even on the virtual world that you need to have ownership, and it's just good that Ari, which is the CEO of our company, have put a stick first on that project, and any other similar kind of concept subsequent to Decentraland, I will have a great doubt that it will be as successful as Decentraland, because it's a pretty wild idea.
Just in case you didn't follow exactly how Decentraland, you know, first evolved, they basically said, "Hey, look, sign up." I guess it was a reverse auction process. Yeah. So you could say, "Hey, look, I want this piece of land." If you won the auction, you would then pay for it. Now, let's say you're a landowner, you have the coordinates of it, and then, you know, Decentraland said, "Okay, yeah, we're building out the world, and when the world's built, you'll own that piece of land." So, you know, it's a way to raise money. I mean, it's literally, you've put out a concept, people pay you up front for something you deliver later. And so this represents, I think, a very innovative model for funding. We've seen virtual items being sold before the game is done. I think the scale at which you've done it is just incredible. And of course, 70,000 pieces of land, that's a really large base of supporters. People ask me all the time, like, well, why is blockchain so interesting and cryptocurrency so interesting? And I'd say it's really because it's the best funding, the most efficient funding mechanism ever invented. I mean, typically you have to pay thousands of people to go out and advertise for you, to market for you, to say how great you are. Cryptocurrency is the reverse, where they pay you to do that, right? I mean, like, you go buy an EOS token, and now you're like, EOS is the best thing since sliced bread. You know, you paid EOS for the right to be able to advertise and market, you know, what they're doing. So, you know, in a way, if you're interested in a game and you buy an asset in the game, you want to see that game successful. And that's a powerful shift where the crowd can really make something. It's like a crowdfunder on steroids. So, do you have?
So one of the things that we're building at NHN is we're building a gaming ecosystem, and then one of the services that we're building, because you're mentioning it, is we're actually building a Kickstarter for game development using staking tokens. So you can stake our native token, which then supports the development of games in development from mostly indie game developers. And if the fundraise is successful, then that game would come to fruition, and you would get rewarded with in-game items and these type of things. So it's kind of like you said, how, you know, crypto is like one of an interesting way to raise money, but we're using that and building that on top of another model like Kickstarter that's also been proven to fund game development.
So let me get this straight. You have like a 2-level fundraising mechanism, like where they can stake a token, but then they can also back a project.
So in Kickstarter, you guys probably know, is you post a project, you have a fundraising target, you raise money. If it hits that target raise, then you get the rewards that are given to you by the person that posted the project. So instead of using cash, we use our token, and then that game is allowed to be published on our platform, our portal, which is something else that we're building using the same currency, the token.
Wow. Okay, that's pretty awesome. And are you driving the blockchain project there, or is?
Yeah, we have a team. One of my teammates is right here, but we have a team.
Okay.
But I'm more of the outward-facing face.
Got it. Got it.
More of like the product manager, design.
Fantastic. And would you say that, like, this sort of, I mean, one, I think it's a very innovative model. So I'm happy to hear a large company like NHN like really leaning into that. How would you say the rest of the industry is here in Korea relative? I mean, are you think they're being as bold, or are they more timid, or?
I can't say I know for certain, because I haven't really talked to every large game company here in Korea about blockchain projects. I do know for a fact that everyone's has thought about it, right? And thinking about what to do with it and how we could use it. Even internally, we've been discussing for months, like, okay, we're very interested in blockchain. We see it as an opportunity, right? But we don't know exactly how to use it. That was our conversation early last year. How do we utilize this, right? Do we want to build something decentralized, or something more centralized, or something in the middle, a hybrid approach? What are the pros and cons? And after mulling over for many, many months, I think we came up with an interesting model. But I think, to answer your question, other companies, specifically some of the big ones we've talked to, and I do know for a fact they have interest in it, but from my understanding, most of them don't have internal projects at this point. Yeah, or at least announced any projects that I know of.
Just comment a little bit. So probably the first tier company like NHN and the Nexon and so on are the much bigger companies that have their own project. They're thinking about it, or they've been investigating it for a long time. We're gonna soon announce probably second and third tier Korean game company partnership with the Decentraland because it's a perfect match. They've been thinking about it, but they haven't really decided what to do. But Decentraland kind of provide kind of a pilot run and then get a bit of a taste on what's like to do crypto games. So we will make some announcements soon, but we can play that role as well in that field.
Great. Well, I think what you're doing here and NHN is doing here, I think is some of the most innovative things I've heard of in the larger gaming industry. There are a lot of conversations, but I think people are still evaluating overall. Blizzard, EA, Riot, and Tencent. Now, I actually, there was this great project I saw recently. Tencent launched a AR, like Pokemon Go meets CryptoKitties, where you would use your phone, you'd go around, and you'd be able to collect items. I think it's called Let's Hunt Monsters, and it's on their own chain, so it's their own private chain, and you can collect items. So I'm very curious to see how that project goes, because I think it sort of captures two really interesting ideas at the same time. Pokemon Go is still, I think, one of the top 5 grossing apps for games. Is it, or maybe top 10? Yeah. I think it's top 5 mobile. Fortnite, obviously, being number 1. So, well, cool. So I think we're good. I think we're let's thank our panelists. So thanks for coming, guys.